I wasn't supposed to be there. That's the thing nobody tells you about working press accreditation for royal events. Half the time you're standing in a corridor that smells like old wood and fresh flowers, holding a badge that says you belong somewhere you very much do not belong, waiting for something to happen. It was a Tuesday. October. The kind of October that London does better than anywhere else on earth, where the sky can't decide if it's silver or grey and the light coming through tall windows looks like it was painted by someone who took the job very seriously. I was covering a children's hospital charity event at a venue in Kensington. One of those afternoons where 50 photographers would get 15 minutes and then file out like a school group leaving a museum. I'd done it a dozen times. I knew the routine. What I didn't know was that I'd end up standing close enough to notice something I've never been able to stop thinking about. The room filled the way these rooms always do, incrementally, then, all at once. Trustees in dark suits. Charity directors with the practiced smiles of people who spend their careers asking wealthy strangers for money. Volunteers in matching branded lanyards, bouncing on the balls of their feet. Hospital staff who look tired in the way that comes from caring about something relentlessly for years on end. Children. A handful of them. Some in wheelchairs, some trailing 4 poles with the indifferent confidence of kids who've made peace with medical equipment the way the rest of us make peace with backpacks. One boy had drawn something on his hand in blue marker, a rocket ship, I think. He kept looking at it like he was checking his notes. The room was warm and a little too loud, and everyone in it was bracing for something without knowing exactly what they were bracing for. Then, she walked in. Now, I'd been in rooms when Catherine, Princess of Wales, enters them before. I know what that moment looks like. There's a shift in the air. Not theatrical, nothing so obvious. More like when a piece of music changes key and the whole room leans in a half-inch without realizing it. But this time I noticed something I'd registered before without ever really registering. She was wearing a dress the color of deep water. One color. Top to bottom. No pattern, no print, no contrast. A thin belt at the waist, the same shade as everything else. Simple enough that for a split second, you couldn't understand why she looked so extraordinary in it. Then, you started to understand. I was standing near a woman named Margaret, one of the charity's founding trustees. She'd told me earlier, 23 years with the organization. She watched Catherine cross the room and said, almost to herself, barely a whisper, "She makes it so easy for them." I looked at her. "Sorry?" Margaret nodded toward the children. "Watch the kids." I watched. The boy with the rocket ship on his hand had gone very still. Not intimidated, something softer than that. He was staring at Catherine the way children stare at things they find genuinely beautiful, with no self-consciousness about the staring at all. A girl of maybe 7, sitting in a wheelchair with a knitted blanket across her lap, had reached out a hand. Not asking for anything. Just reaching, the way you reach toward light without thinking about it. And Catherine moved toward her like she'd been waiting for exactly this, like the whole rest of the room had paused on a frame and only this radius, her and the small girl and this particular moment, was still running. She crouched down. Not the careful, maintain my hemline crouch. All the way down. Eye level. The color of her dress didn't change, didn't catch strangely, didn't suddenly look fussy or complicated against the knitted blanket or the clinical backdrop of the room. It just stayed what it was. Present. Unobtrusive. Hers. Margaret, still beside me, was smiling in the way people smile when they've known something for a long time and rarely get to say it out loud. "It's deliberate," she said. "I've thought about it for years. It took me ages to understand why. I had my recorder in my pocket. I didn't turn it on. Some things you write down later, from memory, because taking out the recorder changes the conversation into something else. The children," she said. "When you visit a child in hospital, everything around them is loud in a way that isn't sound. The machines. The nurses' scrubs. The get-well balloons somebody's tied to the rail, and God bless whoever brought them, but they're loud. And the child in the middle of all of it is already working so hard just to be present." She paused. And then, if someone walks in wearing something complicated, you know what I mean, something with a big pattern, a loud print, a lot of visual noise, the child has to process all of that before they can get to the person. There's a layer in the way. I looked back at the girl with the blanket. She and Catherine were still talking. The girl was showing her something, a drawing, folded small, creased from being kept in a pocket for what looked like days. No layer, I said. No layer, Margaret agreed. I've thought about that afternoon a lot since. More than I've thought about a lot of things I've covered that were, on paper, considerably more significant. Because here's the thing about a choice like that, a deliberate, sustained, years-long choice to reduce visual complexity, it doesn't make headlines. It doesn't have a press release. Nobody's going to run a piece on the quiet strategic thinking behind a monochrome palette at children's charity events. It's just a thing she figured out, or was taught, or arrived at through years of standing in rooms like that one, and then kept doing. Kept doing every time. Not for the cameras, we were behind her for most of the afternoon, we weren't getting the dress anyway, we were getting the back of her head and the face of the child. For the child. Only ever for the child. The boy with the rocket ship eventually made his way over. He'd been watching from across the room with the focused patience of someone executing a plan. He held out his hand, the one with the drawing on it. Catherine looked at it. Really looked at it, the way adults mostly don't, the way that takes a second and means something. Then, she said something I couldn't hear, and the boy's whole face reorganized itself around a grin he couldn't have stopped if he'd tried. She pulled back the sleeve of her dress to show him her wrist, bare. Then, she mimed, very seriously, drawing on it. He laughed. She laughed. The sleeve fell back, the same deep water blue, uninterrupted. And, the boy kept the rocket ship on his hand for the rest of the afternoon like it was suddenly worth keeping. Dominique had photographed royals for 11 years. She didn't say it the way people say things they're proud of. She said it the way you say I've lived near a train line for 11 years, as simple fact, as context, as a thing that explains why certain sounds no longer wake you up. I met her outside a press pen on the mall, mid-morning, late spring. The kind of morning that smells like cut grass and diesel and, somewhere, inexplicably, waffles. She had 2 camera bodies. She was eating a cereal bar with the joyless efficiency of someone who'd learned to eat standing up years ago and made peace with it. We got talking the way press people do at these things, complaints first, logistics second, then, somewhere in the third hour, something real. She's the one who told me the second thing. People talk about her clothes like it's a fashion conversation, Dominique said. And, okay, it's partly that. But, I've been pointing a lens at her for over a decade and, I can tell you, there's a reason the photographs work. I asked what she meant. She held up her camera. Not pointing it anywhere. Just holding it between us like a prop for explaining something. When I'm shooting a formal event, a walkabout, a reception, one of those massive outdoor ceremonies, I've got maybe 2 seconds to get the shot. There are 20 other photographers next to me, the light is wrong, there's a crowd moving in the background, and, somewhere in all of that I have to find my subject fast. She lowered the camera. A patterned outfit is a problem. The eye doesn't know where to go. The pattern fights the face. It fights the background. My lens fights it. Everyone fights it. But, a clean, single color, the camera finds her face immediately. Every time. The photograph resolves before I've even thought about it. I'd never considered that. Not once. I'd spent years looking at photographs of Catherine at public engagements, on steps, on tarmacs, in town centers, in hospital lobbies, and thinking, in the vague way you think about things you don't examine, that she always looked composed, always looked readable, always seemed present in the image rather than competing with it. I'd attributed it to bone structure. To training. To the particular way she stands. It's not just that, Dominique said, finishing the cereal bar, scrunching the wrapper into her jacket pocket. It's what I call, and I've never said this out loud, so forgive me if it sounds strange, she photographs like she's making a decision about the photograph. Like she knows exactly where she'll land in the frame and has already solved it for you. She paused. The dress is part of that. One color means the photograph has a subject. Just one. Her. And whoever she's with. Whoever she's with. That last part. There's a photograph, I'm not going to say where I saw it, because I don't remember. It came across my feed like things dude taken at an outdoor community event somewhere in Wales. Catherine is shaking hands with an elderly man in a flat cap. He's maybe 80. He's got the look of someone who stood in line for a long time and is now quietly astonished to find himself here, in this moment, hand extended, this woman's full attention on him. She's wearing pale green. Solid. No embellishment. What strikes you about the photograph is not her. It's him. His face. The quality of his astonishment. The green is there, but it doesn't compete. It's color, not content. And so the content, that man's face, that moment owns the entire image. I showed it to Dominique later, sent it to her phone. She texted back 3 words, see. Every time. There was a woman at that same spring event on the mall, not press, just public, standing a few feet from the barrier with a handmade sign and a child on her hip. The child was about 2, wearing a yellow raincoat, deeply unimpressed by all of it, focused on trying to remove his own shoe. When Catherine passed in, paused, she does this is a thing she does, she pauses at the handmade signs, she reads them, the woman said something. I wasn't close enough to hear. But I saw what happened. Catherine reached over and touched the boy's foot. The shoe he'd been wrestling off. Just briefly, a touch and a smile and a word to the mother. The child stopped fussing. Not because of who she was. Because of how she did it. That small, unhurried thing. The yellow of his raincoat against the solid color of her outfit made the only image worth taking in that whole section of the crowd. One photographer got it. It ran everywhere. The photograph worked because neither of them was fighting the frame. Dominique said something near the end of our conversation that I've been turning over ever since. She said, you know what a photographer is really doing? We're asking, what is this picture about? Every element either answers that question or gets in the way of answering it. The best subjects have already answered it before we've raised the camera. She put her second body over her shoulder. With her, the answer is always the same. The picture is about the person in front of her. And everything about the way she turns up, the way she dresses, the way she stands, the way she gives you her eyes, it's all just her pointing at that answer. This person. Here. The cereal bar wrapper fell out of her pocket when she walked away. She picked it up without breaking stride and dropped it in a bin 20 feet ahead, without looking. The practiced efficiency of someone who spent a very long time in crowds, watching people, learning to see. I stood there a little longer than I needed to. The day was getting warmer. The grass smell was winning over the diesel. Somewhere behind me, a tourist was explaining to another tourist, loudly, in Italian, the precise location of Buckingham Palace, which was directly in front of them. I thought about what it means to enter a room and have already decided, before you arrived, that the room is not about you. And what it costs. And whether you can tell, from the outside, what it costs. Elena was a color consultant before she became something harder to name. She'd spent 15 years working with broadcasters, the kind of work nobody knows exists until they hear about it, and then they immediately understand why it has to exist. Helping news anchors understand what reads as authoritative on camera versus what reads as distracted. Helping politicians understand that certain patterns create a strobe effect on older televisions that makes viewers feel vaguely ill and change channels without knowing why. Color is not decorative, she told me, very matter of fact, in a coffee shop in Clerkenwell where she came once a week because she liked the acoustics. It's communicative. It always has been. We just stopped teaching people that. We'd been introduced by a mutual contact who knew I'd been thinking about this. Apparently Elena had very specific thoughts. There's a principle, she said, folding her hands around her coffee. We call it visual hierarchy. It's the order in which the eye processes the elements in a scene. The eye is lazy, it goes to contrast first, then color, then movement. If you can control where the eye goes first, you control the whole experience. She paused to let me catch up. A solid, mid-tone, elegant color does something specific. It creates a unified field. The eye processes it instantly, one read, done, satisfied, and then immediately moves to the next available point of interest. Which is the face. Which is where all the information actually lives. And a pattern? I asked. A pattern asks the eye to keep working. To map it, to trace it, to resolve it. The eye is still doing that work when it should already be at the face. You've lost a second. And, in a second, in the kind of situations we're talking about, you can lose the entire emotional transaction. I asked her whether she thought it was intentional. She looked at me the way people look at you when they find the question mildly interesting but slightly obvious. Does it matter, she said. Whether it started as intuition or instruction or both, at some point it became a practice. And practices that get sustained for this long, in high-stakes environments, with this much consistency, they get sustained because they work. The person doing them knows they work, even if they couldn't always articulate why. She sipped her coffee. But, I think she could articulate it. I think she could tell you exactly what she's doing and, precisely why. She just doesn't, because explaining it would make it about the dress, and the dress is not the point. Here is what I have come to believe, after the hospital event and the conversation with Margaret, after Dominique and the mall and the boy with the rocket ship, after Elena and the concept of visual hierarchy, the choice is not about fashion. It was never about fashion. Fashion is what you wear to be seen. This is what you wear so that other people, specific, particular, individual other people who are standing in front of you on the hardest days of their lives, or the most surprising days, or the days they'll describe to their families later with a kind of disbelieving wonder, can be seen instead. One color because pattern would pull the eye away from the child's face. One color because the photograph should be about the man in the flat cap, not the dress. One color because when you walk into a room carrying the full weight of what that name and that title and that life carries, you need to put something down before you walk through the door, and this is one of the things she puts down. Every time. There's a moment I keep coming back to. Not from the hospital, not from the mall. From a much smaller event, a community drop-in center in the Midlands, the kind of place that runs on volunteers and cold tea and genuine belief that showing up matters. I wasn't there. I heard about it from someone who was. A woman who'd been using the center for 2 years, recently widowed, recently rehoused, the kind of quietly catastrophic life situation that doesn't make news because it happens to too many people at once, had been told, the week before, that Catherine would be visiting. She'd spent 3 days deciding whether she wanted to attend. She wasn't sure she could manage it. Not the emotion of it, she'd said this to the friend who told me the story, but the spectacle of it. She was exhausted by spectacle. She'd had enough of things being overwhelming. She went anyway. She told her friend afterward, I thought it would be a performance. I thought I'd feel like a backdrop. She didn't. She came in and there was nothing to look at except her face. And her face was just a face. Paying attention. That's all. Just a face. Paying attention. The last thing Elena said to me, pulling her jacket from the back of her chair, was this: you know what the most radical thing a very visible person can do is? Make themselves visually quiet. In a world that rewards noise, that's an act of will. Most people can't sustain it. It requires a very specific kind of discipline, the discipline of believing that your presence is not diminished by your restraint. She considered this. It might even be increased by it. I don't know when I'll stop thinking about the girl with the folded drawing. The one who'd kept it in her pocket, creased and a little soft at the edges from being handled, saved for this. She handed it over with the gravity of someone offering something real. Not a card, not a get-well balloon. Something she made. Catherine took it with both hands. She unfolded it carefully, the way you unfold something when you know it matters to the person watching you unfold it. She looked at it. The same way she'd looked at the rocket ship, not the glancing recognition of someone performing attention, but a half-second of genuine stillness that means something landed. I don't know what the drawing was. I was too far back to see. But I saw the girl's face when Catherine looked up. And there it was. The whole thing. The whole reason. Rendered in the face of a small girl in a hospital whose drawing had, for one held moment, been the most important thing in the room. Nothing competing for that. Nothing at all. The deep water blue. The pale green. The solid, quiet, deliberate color. Always just one. A frame with only one subject. You.